Oh my God, it's wet outside. Oh, my shoes and socks are soaked. Ow!
Do you pay the war lands or you run in this for blockers? In response, yeah, but that dies to roll. That is reach. Time walk on a Benopto terrorist. Turning nemesis. Vigilance death to dazed. Turn 1 soul. Western East campaign combat creatures with power 2 or less. Combat damage that would be dealt to creatures you control can't be prevented. When Western Beast is magic calls together, attack Master King.
This wasn't here before, but it does give me an idea. An idea for another LRRMTG deck tech with me, Ben Ulmer. The Phyrexians return and Phyrexia all will be one after some not so subtle foreshadowing from past sets, and I couldn't be more excited. As a big fan of horror aesthetics, the Phyrexians are some of my favorite creatures in the MTG universe. But as much as I love Elish Norn and her bad romance ways, I wanted to break with tradition and do something a little different for this deck tech. Like mono red. If you love horrifying nightmare monsters, then you'll love Sulfim, Mayhem Dominus, in a deck I'm calling Completely Crispy. Sulfim is a 5/4 Phyrexian horror for 2 red that reads, if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. And for 1 generic and 2 red Phyrexian mana, and discard 2 cards, put an indestructible counter on Sulfim. Let's talk about that first ability for a sec. Non-symmetrical double damage on a commander is pretty scary, but on a commander that can give itself indestructible at instant speed, that's downright spoopy. And yes, this deck is jammed full with your typical loadout of burn spells, but we're not just burning our opponents, we also do a little burning to ourselves. You know, as a treat. Self-burn means that we'll be using creatures that care about getting hit to deal massive damage on the return to our enemies. Cards like Brash Taunter, Stuffy Doll, Wrathful Red Dragon, and Ill-Tempered Loner take any damage that gets put on them and copies it back wherever you'd like. And even if all those creatures die somehow, you'll soon be back on the pain train because Blazing Sunsteel can turn any of your creatures into a Stuffy Doll, and any of your opponents into crispy piles of game-losing regrets. And when we're talking about equipment, burning yourself can be risky when you've undoubtedly drawn the ire of those who have yet to see the beauty of completion. I mean, your opponents. So, why not strap on a Basilisk Collar or Shadow Spear to give your creatures lifelink? As a bonus, Shadow Spear also makes sure you can always hit your opponent's permanents with your Fiery Wrath. And speaking of hitting your opponent's permanents, why not send damage to them and your opponent's domes with Chandra's Incinerator? Not only does it get cheaper for every point of damage dealt, once it's on the battlefield, it copies any damage we do to our opponent, doubles it, then deals it back to a creature or planeswalker they control. That's awful. For them. Speaking of awful, if you wanted to, you could just be straight up gross and kill everyone on the spot with Heartless Hidetsugu. But I'll leave that up to you. I don't know, some people are weird and want the game to go past 5 turns. Now I need to level with you. This part might get a little scary, but as long as you've got a calculator, or a friend who plays Sudoku for fun, I'm sure you can handle it. It's time for math. Sometimes a single instance of damage is not enough, which is why we have cards like Arc Bond, which take any damage dealt to a target creature, then send it out to all the creatures and players for the turn. Why kill just a few creatures with Blasphemous Act, Into the Maw, or Star of Extinction when you can send a nuclear launch at everything? And if someone is unfortunate enough to survive, for only 2 mana, Impact Resonance is here to copy the highest amount taken and send it out again. And now that we've talked about the burn portion of our deck, we can talk about the second angle of our commander, because what's a Mayhem Dominus without a little
madness?
You see, Solfim has another ability. For the cost of only 1 generic mana and 4 life, we can discard 2 cards from our hand and make it indestructible. What a perfect opportunity to throw in a few powerful madness cards. Avacyn's Judgment, Fiery Temper, Stromkirk Occultist, Revolutionist, and Anya's Ravager are great cards to pitch to Solfim's effect, with Ravager helping you to refill your empty hand whenever it attacks. You can also reap huge value with Surly Badgersaur or Currency Converter, which, I'll level with you, is a card I had literally never seen until I started brewing this deck. But it's a 1 mana artifact that lets you loot for 2 mana, or tap it to turn one of the cards you decided to exile with it into a treasure or rogue. And if you've noticed that maybe you've thrown too many cards away, why not play Wheel of Misfortune and bet most of your life total to draw 7? Then, activate your Soul Conduit and pass that low life total to someone else. It's what the father of machines would want. Of course, it wouldn't be a Phyrexian deck without artifacts, and the Ozolith stands front and center. Did an opponent manage to remove Solfim from the board? No worries, just move that indestructible counter you made onto the Ozolith and then give it to another friend. And finally, because this is definitely a
Big red
style of deck, we'll also toss in a bunch of mana and ramp to help you keep up with the uncompleted masses. And yes, you could play your usual mana rocks, but why not also consider cards like Cursed Mirror, Surveyor's Scope, or Liquimetal Torque for some extra variety. Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, will also make short work of your opponents by dealing 6 damage every time you play a mountain. And Nykthos will generate a ton of mana since you're a monocolored deck. Overall, Solfim looks horrifying to play against. Indestructible commanders have always been my favorite, since like the original Theros gods, and this beast looks like it's gonna give them a run for their money. Between creatures that are painful to attack into, and the ability to zot your opponent's life totals out of nowhere, soon everyone will see the glory that comes with Phyrexian power. So go out, my brethren, and show the world the power of the machines. Complete victory is assured.